Judge Harrison thought he was simply sentencing a confused teenager until the defendant started tearing apart the case with the precision of a seasoned attorney. The air in the courthouse was thick, almost oppressive. The gallery was packed with spectators, all eagerly watching as the drama unfolded before them. David Collins, a 19-year-old with an air of quiet confidence, stood at the defense table. His hands were shoved in his pockets, his chin slightly raised, showing a determination that no one in the room had expected. The charges against him were serious: grand theft auto and resisting arrest. But to Judge Harrison, David was just another teenager in trouble. But David wasn't like any defendant Harrison had seen before. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping slowly on the polished surface of his desk. He stared at David over the rim of his glasses, a half smirk on his lips. "You think you're going to pull off some courtroom magic, don't you?" Harrison said, his voice dripping with disdain. "This isn't a stage, kid." A few chuckles rippled through the room. The prosecutor, Derek Malone, the stenographer, even the bailiff seemed to share the joke. But David didn't flinch. He wasn't here to entertain. David had spent years mentally preparing for moments like this. Not to be a defendant, but to be a player in the system. While most of his friends spent their time with video games, David was absorbed in legal cases, reading law books, memorizing court rulings. His mother, a seasoned paralegal, had shared countless stories about the flaws in the justice system. By 14, David could break down a courtroom scene better than most law students. But none of that mattered to Judge Harrison, who saw only another kid caught in the system. "Let's move this along," Judge Harrison sighed, flipping through the case file. "I have a dinner reservation at 7. Another round of chuckles echoed, but this time David's lips curled into the faintest of smirks. Harrison had made his first mistake. The prosecutor, Derek Malone, stood up, exuding an air of confidence that came with experience. His suit was crisp, his voice rehearsed. "Your Honor," Malone began, "the state will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, David Collins, was caught in a stolen 2023 Ford Mustang, reported missing earlier that day. Officers pursued the defendant through downtown and observed him trying to evade arrest. His fingerprints were found on the steering wheel. The evidence speaks for itself." The words landed heavily, and the crowd in the gallery shifted in their seats. It sounded like a simple case: a stolen car, a chase, an arrest. But David wasn't convinced. He had been in this situation before, but as an observer, not a participant. Grayson glanced at David, then back at Malone. "Proceed." Malone continued, walking confidently toward the jury box. "The defense may claim that this was all a mistake, that Mr. Collins is just an innocent bystander. But let's be clear, what kind of innocent bystander tries to flee from the police?" The tension in the room increased. David remained perfectly still. He didn't respond. Not yet. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his chin resting on his hand. "Let's hear from the defense." David's public defender, Leah Montgomery, stood hesitantly. She opened her mouth but faltered. The judge turned his attention back to her. David placed a hand on her arm, a silent request. Leah hesitated, then sat down. David stood. The room fell silent. His eyes swept over the gallery before finally meeting Judge Harrison's gaze. "Your Honor, I will be representing myself." The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Even Malone couldn't suppress his shock, letting out an awkward laugh. David's calm demeanor never wavered. He wasn't about to back down now. The real battle was just beginning. "Before I proceed," David said, turning his attention to the prosecution, "I'd like to confirm something with Mr. Malone." Malone crossed his arms, clearly trying to maintain his composure. "Go ahead." David's eyes never left Malone's as he spoke. "You said Officer Sean Reed witnessed me behind the wheel of the vehicle. Is that correct?" Malone nodded, his voice impatient. "That's correct." "And that testimony is included in his report?" David asked. Malone exhaled sharply. "Yes, of course." "Then I would like to request the officer's GPS data from that night." The room went still. If Officer Reed was where he said he was, David reasoned, the GPS logs should confirm his location. But David had a feeling they wouldn't match. A ripple of confusion passed through the gallery. Malone tried to regain control. "This is absurd. You're questioning a law enforcement officer's credibility over a minor technicality." David raised an eyebrow. "I'm simply requesting verification. If Reed was where he said he was, then the data will show it. If not—" He let the sentence hang in the air, his gaze sharp. Judge Harrison, sensing the shift in the room, glanced at Malone, who was now visibly uncomfortable. "Does the prosecution have any objections to verifying Officer Reed's GPS logs?" Malone hesitated. The moment stretched on, drawing out the tension. Finally, he muttered, "No objections, Your Honor." The first crack in the prosecution's confidence had appeared. David wasn't done yet. He turned to face the jury. "I'm sure you've all heard the prosecution's claim that my fingerprints were on the steering wheel of the stolen vehicle. But let's think about this for a moment. Does touching something automatically make you guilty?" The prosecutor's confidence was waning. He flipped through his notes, trying to find a way to recover. David wasn't finished. "Let's talk about the forensic evidence for a second. Was the forensic specialist subpoenaed to testify?" Malone faltered. "No, Your Honor." David's lips pressed into a thin line. "So, the state expects you to convict me based on evidence that wasn't properly cross-examined. How can you be sure that it's valid?" Malone was scrambling now, his arguments falling apart piece by piece. Judge Harrison rubbed his temple. This wasn't the easy win he had expected. David, seeing his moment, continued. "I'd like to submit into evidence a statement from the actual owner of the stolen vehicle, Mr. Lucas Franklin." David pulled out a printed statement and read it aloud. "I left my car running outside the coffee shop, and when I came back, it was gone. I didn't see the person who took it, but I know one thing for sure. The person was not a young black man." The courtroom went silent. The statement from the vehicle's owner was a game changer. Malone, sweating now, rushed to his feet. "This is irrelevant. The defendant was found in possession of the vehicle." David shook his head. "No, I wasn't. I was arrested blocks away from where the car was found. I was walking home with friends, getting snacks. I wasn't near the car. I wasn't in the car, and I wasn't running." The courtroom was stunned into silence. Judge Harrison looked at David for a long moment, a realization dawning on him. "This case is not as clear-cut as you think," David said, his voice unwavering. "The real thief is still out there." Judge Harrison sat still for a moment, the weight of David's words sinking in. The air in the courtroom was electric, the room silent except for the occasional rustling of papers. His fingers drummed absent-mindedly on the edge of his desk as he processed what had just been laid before him. David wasn't just defending himself, he was challenging the entire system. The system that often acted on assumptions, That picked the easiest target without seeking the full truth. And in that moment, everyone in the room began to realize this case wasn't just about one stolen car. It was about how easily people could be judged, convicted, and forgotten based on nothing more than biases and stereotypes. David stepped forward, his voice calm yet firm as he addressed the jury. You've heard the evidence. You've seen the cracks in the prosecution's case. But more importantly, you've witnessed the system in action. It's easy to make assumptions, to pick a suspect and believe the story that fits, but that's not justice. Justice isn't about making it easy. It's about making sure the truth is heard. He paused, letting his words settle in. The jury was leaning forward now, eyes fixed on him. David continued, I didn't steal that car, but let's look beyond me for a second. How many other cases are like mine? How many innocent people are sitting in jail right now, convicted on nothing more than an assumption because they didn't have the chance to speak their truth? We all have a responsibility to challenge the system when it fails. We cannot remain silent when injustice is right in front of us. The room was quiet, the weight of his message sinking into everyone who heard it. Even Judge Harrison, who had seen countless trials in his time, felt a shift in his perspective. He had expected an easy trial, a quick conviction. Instead, he was witnessing the unraveling of a flawed system. Thank you, Your Honor, for hearing me out, David said as he turned back to the judge. And thank you to the jury for listening with open minds. I hope you'll remember this moment. Remember the importance of looking beyond the surface and seeking the truth, no matter how hard it may be to find. Judge Harrison stared at David for a long moment before nodding slowly. His voice, usually full of authority, now carried a hint of respect. Case dismissed. The gavel came down with finality, but the impact of the decision would last much longer than the echo of the sound. The courtroom was filled with murmurs of disbelief, of relief, and of shock. David had done what many thought impossible. He had challenged the system and forced it to confront its own weaknesses. As David stood there, his shoulders squared, his gaze unwavering, something was different. He wasn't just a defendant anymore. He was a force, a symbol of what could be accomplished when one person stood up for what was right, even against impossible odds. Outside the courthouse, the cameras were flashing, reporters calling out questions. But David wasn't interested in the spotlight. His mother, Denise, stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, her arms crossed, a stern look on her face. You scared me half to death, she said, shaking her head as David walked toward her. David chuckled, scratching the back of his head. Had to take a risk, Ma. She pulled him into a tight hug. You're stubborn, but I'm proud of you. As the flashbulbs popped and the crowd swirled around them, David's focus wasn't on the media frenzy. It was on the bigger picture, the one he had just helped shift. Across the street, Judge Harrison stood by his car, watching David. He wasn't laughing anymore. His expression had shifted from arrogance to something more reflective. He wasn't just looking at a defendant anymore. He was looking at a young man who had forced him to confront the uncomfortable truths about the justice system. And in that moment, Harrison knew he wouldn't forget this case. David Collins had made him see the world differently. He had made him question his own assumptions. Life lesson. This case wasn't just about a stolen car. It was about the power of truth and the responsibility we all have to stand up when things aren't right. David wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, to speak out when others might have remained silent. In a world where people are too often judged based on stereotypes or assumptions, it's crucial to remember. Justice isn't just about the law. It's about the people. It's about fairness, truth, and standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. If this story made you think even for a second, if it made you question what you thought you knew about justice, share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the fight for justice doesn't end with one case. It starts with all of us. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that matter, and let's keep the conversation going. Because next time, it might not be David Collins. It might be someone you know. Subscribe now and join the fight for truth and justice.